All right, so we're back in First Esdras, the first chapter in the Apocrypha. This is the same Ezra that you read about in the Old Testament. It's just spelled differently with an SD instead of a Z.
Okay.
So we're going to pick up the first chapter, first verse.
Okay.
And it reads, it says, and Josiah held the feast of the Passover in Jerusalem unto his Lord, and offered the Passover the 14th day of the first month. So Josiah is one of the kings of Judah, one of the last 4 or 5, I think, kings of Judah, or the 4th to the 5th from the last king of Judah, I should say, before we had no more kings in the reign. So during his reign, he started to repair the breaches from some of the wicked kings that had the temples and things desecrated. So you read in Chronicles and First Kings that they began to repair the temple. And in repairing the temple, they now found things pertaining to the law, and they started keeping the laws again. And during that time is when they're now keeping the Passover. So this is what we're reading about here, about the Passover that Josiah kept, King Josiah kept. And there's a reason why this Passover is highlighted, because of its grandeur. What I mean by its grandeur is because it was a very elaborate Passover that was kept during his time. Big Passover.
Very special.
I mean, I want to just say special, but it was very great and grand in its entirety. All right, that's what we're about to read. So again, and Josiah held the feast of the Passover in Jerusalem unto his Lord, and offered the Passover the 14th day of the first month. Having set the priests according to their daily courses, being arrayed in long garments in the temple of the Lord. Right? So got back the order of the priests as it was instituted, starting back during the time of Moses and Aaron. He set them back up, had the royal apparel on, the garments on. When you look at the priests and you look at princes and kings, they're almost similar in their attire, meaning it's very grand, very elaborate. It looks the part, right? That's why the priest and the king are the 2 most important figures within Israel, the high priest and the king, right? But when you look at, both have somewhat what you would call like a crown. One has a diadem, one has an actual crown, but the garments that they have were very elaborate and grand, right? It says, verse 3, and he spake unto the Levites, the holy ministers of Israel, that they should hallow themselves unto the Lord, to set the holy ark of the Lord in the house that King Solomon, the son of David, had built. So they had to go and hallow themselves, get themselves clean, refrain from being around their wives, all the things that they need to do, wash themselves, clean themselves before they put on the holy apparel and then start doing the offerings. All of this now appertain unto them hallowing themselves according to the proper ordinance. We started to read about some of those things a few weeks going all the way back when Yahweh Kanan started to read in Exodus going into Leviticus. It went and talked about how the temple or the tabernacle was built. It talked about how the priests were hallowed, anointed, the garments that they had, how the holy vessels that was placed in the temple, how they came to be, right? So it says in verse 4, and said, ye shall no more bear the ark upon your shoulders. Now therefore serve the Lord your power, and minister unto his people Israel, and prepare ye after your families and kindreds, right? Because prior to this, when we had the Ark of the Covenant, Ark of the Tabernacle, they would bear it upon them shoulders and go from place to place, and it will be kept in the holiest of holies within the tabernacle. But then when Solomon built the temple in Jerusalem, that now became a permanent resting place for the ark, right? It did not now have to go place to place anymore. It was going to stay there, right? Verse 5, according as David, the king of, according to his magnificence of Solomon, his son, and standing in the temple, according to the several dignity of the families of you, the Levites, who minister in the presence of your brethren, the children of Israel. Offer the Passover in order and make ready the sacrifices for your brethren, and keep the Passover according to the commandment of Yahweh, or of the Lord, which was given unto Moses. So now you have to go back into the scriptures and make sure you follow the ordinance. So what we read in Exodus 12 chapter on how the Most High is specific about how the lamb was supposed to be kept until the 10th day, or on the 10th day separated from the rest of the other lambs, right? And then on the 14th day, now had to go and be sacrificed in the evening, right? Everything according to the ordinance, now you had to follow that and keeping the Passover, because again, this is the repairing of the temple and the repairing of the people. So now in keeping the holy day, now he's making sure that we follow scripture. Verse 7, and unto the people that was found there, Josiah gave 30,000 lambs and kids and 3,000 calves. These things were given of the king's allowance, according as he promised, to the people, to the priests, and to the Levites, right? So he donated of his own allowance, because remember, when we first got kings, Samuel and the Most High told the children of Israel that you ask for a king, I'm going to give you a king. But keep in mind, this is what's going to happen when you get a king, right? The king going to have to take some of the people, some of the men for themselves. They're going to have to be his confectionaries, his cooks. They're going to have to be his singers, his farmers, right? His husband. He's going to have to now acquire them for his service. And he's going to have to take some of your land. He's going to take the land to grow his fruits and vegetables and things. He's going to have his animals and things on his own property, right? Within the king's palace and the king's courts. He has to have all these things. So,
dictatorship, because he had to take it?
No, it wasn't a dictatorship, because this is what they asked. They didn't. It was that Israel didn't realize what they were asking for. Samuel had to let them know, you want a king like the heathen? Fine, I'm going to give you a king like the heathen. The Most High was our king, but now you're going to have a king, but he's going to have this. Right? I think this is in 2 Samuel's. It's either 1st or 2 Samuel's, the 8th chapter, I believe. Right. 1 Samuel's, the 8th chapter. First Samuel's, the 8th chapter and the 10th verse. So this is how he was able to give all of these lambs and calves and things out of his allowance. It says 1 Samuel's 8 and 10. And Samuel told all the words of the Lord unto the people that ask of him a king. And he said, this will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. He will appoint him captains over thousands and captains over 50s. And he will set them to ear his ground, which is like a husbandman, right? You're going to take care of the field, and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war and instruments of his chariots, right? So now you're going to have those guys who are going to be pounding the metal and making weapons for war, right? Verse 13, and he will take your daughters to be his confectionaries, and to be his cooks, and to be bakers. And he will take your fields and your vineyards and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. And he will take the tenth of your seed and of your vineyards, and give to his officers and to his servants. And he will take your men servants and your maid servants and your goodliest young men and your asses, and put them to work. He will take the tenth of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants, right? and ye shall cry out in that day because of your king, which ye shall have chosen, and the Lord will not hear you in that day, right? Because this is what they asked. They wanted to be like everybody else. So the king has to receive an allowance of all. Now, when you put it in perspective, this is why I said earlier, the priests and the kings were almost very similar, because the priests themselves didn't have land of their own. They didn't have jobs of their own. They were dedicated to the Most High. Right. So the Most High had it with that the people would give them 1/10 of all their increase. Okay. So that's how they were fed. That's how they got animals and fruits and vegetables and things, because it was given to them by the priests. Mm-hmm. Well, the same thing would happen to the king. He would acquire all those things for himself as well. Okay. Yahweh Kanan.
I just want to read this quickly. 1 Kings 12 and 4.
1 Kings 12
verse 4.
And verse 4.
He says, thy father made our yoke grievous. Now therefore make the grievous service of thy father and his heavy yoke, which he put upon us, lighter, and we will serve thee. So the asking the king, because King Solomon's yoke was heavy upon them.
Right.
So he said later on in verse 10, and the young men that were grown up with him spake unto him, saying, thus shalt thou speak unto this people that spake unto thee, saying, thy father made our yoke heavy, but make thou it lighter upon us. Thus shalt thou say unto them, my little finger shall be thicker than my father's loins. And now, whereas my father did lay you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father has chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. So with King Solomon, the yoke was heavy upon them, because they had to, give in the best part and giving the, service to the king. Because we remember, like what Kahan said, we asked for a king. So the king going to require all these things from the people.
Right.
Because before we was only paying tithes to the priest, right?
Right.
And that's it.
Right.
Yeah, or 10%. So
right.
the king going to get 10% too. So that's 20% of our money.
Right.
But in this kingdom here, how much is going to the IRS and the government and everything like that? We get our paycheck, and it's about 1/3 is gone already.
Yeah. Yeah. So with all this being said, it's not to say that Josiah was a wicked king in his own right. When you read the scriptures, he was a righteous king. He was the one, when you read in the Chronicles and in the Kings, he was the one that went throughout the cities, throughout the land, and even the sepulchres of those who were wicked men that was left as a memorial. He went and destroyed them and stamped them out, so that they would not be even a wicked remembrance of anyone within Israel, right? And then he's the one who started to set up and repair that which was right in Israel, all right, to the best of his ability, right, which was right, the best of his knowledge, right? So he wasn't a wicked king. There was a lot of kings that were wicked. The whole majority of all the kings that were in the kingdom of Israel were wicked, and you had handfuls that were wicked that were in the kingdom of Judah as well. He wasn't one of them. He was a righteous king. So now they're keeping the Passover, and he donated all of these herds of the flock for the purpose of the Passover itself, so that the people could keep the Passover, right? Because, when you read the law, each family was supposed to go and get and occupy a lamb for what they could eat. And if it was too much just for them, they would share it with their neighbor. So now, because this is now the repairing, a lot of Israel didn't have things. It was destroyed, the land was destroyed. So he went and provided a lot, donated a lot for the service for the Passover for the people. So reading on back in 1 Esdras in the Apocrypha chapter 1, we have verse 8 now. It says, and Hilkias and Zacharias and Salias, the governors of the temple, gave to the priests for the Passover 2,600 sheep and 300 calves, right? So it says these were the governors of the temple. Now we also read, just like I read in 1 Samuel, that not only was these things just for the king, it said that he would give them these things also for his servants, meaning those who now ruled under him that had positions of authority. They had vineyards and they had animals and things. So now you have other people, whether they were kings or priests, who donated to the purpose of the Passover also. So that's what you read here. These were governors of the temple. They gave to the priests. Verse 9. And Joconias and Samias and Nathaniel his brother, and Asabias and Ochiel and Joram, captains over thousands, gave to the Levites for the Passover 5,000 sheep and 700 calves, right? So here again is other representatives from within the nation that were under King Josiah, who also donated to the purpose of the Passover. You see it's calves and sheep, right? And the sheep, of course, was going to be for the actual sacrifice for the Passover, but the calves were going to be for something different, as we're about to read. Yes. These were, because we read that he would take men that would be captain over 1,000, captain over 50, so forth and so on. These men had positions, and they would also receive, certain property and cattle and things, right? Verse 10, and when these things were done, the priests and Levites, having the unleavened bread, stood in very calmly order according to the kindreds, right? Meaning that the Most High instituted that you had to come out of a certain family in order to do certain rites within the temple or for the purpose of the Most High, right? So that's why it says the priests and the Levites, because everybody within Israel or within Levi had their proper order, right? So they're standing at attention, waiting to execute what was going to be done for the Passover.
So nobody can say, oh, we're going to get some men and we're going to have some kind of whatever and make them priests or Levites.
Right. Right. And back then, and what you did, because you were always, you had your lineage, your record, you had to show what kindred you came out of, right? I came out of the son of him. I came out of the son of this man. I came out of the son of this man. That dates back to that priesthood or dates back to those that were in Levi who had that service, right? If you could not do that, like when you read in Numbers, if you could not trace who you came from, then you could not perform a certain order. And you might have been the person to do it, but if there was no proof to say, oh yeah, he's of the sons of Aaron of this, no, then you can't do it. Right? Right. Because the men themselves needed to have proof. Because like y'all can say, they didn't want the Most High or Israel to fall victim to a plague because something was out of order. Right? Right. Verse 11. And according to the several dignities of the fathers before the people, to offer to the Lord as it is written in the book of Moses. And thus did they in the morning, right? So they went and put everything in order as you read in the law, right? In the 5 books of Moses, you read about that in Exodus as well as Leviticus and Numbers, right? All the things pertaining to the sacrificing and everything that had to happen on that day. Verse 12, and they roasted the Passover with fire as appertaineth. As for the sacrifices, they sod them in brass pots and pans with a good savor. So now it says they roasted the Passover as appertaineth, meaning what we read that the Passover lamb was supposed to be roasted whole with everything on it, right? But then the other stuff, the other sacrifice that we read about the calves, right? They sod them in pots, meaning what? What does it mean when they sod them in pots? They boiled and cooked them in the pots. Now, that's not the Passover sacrifice. Those are the things that would just boiled or cooked. That's what the extra, right? Remember, if y'all can, you're a person who remembers back in the day, there was a big discussion of, hey, we just want to roast the lamb. Another brother was like, yeah, we're going to do that, but we also going to cook this other meat, right? The different meats discussion, right? Wasn't unlawful. It was just what they wanted to do as opposed to what other camp wanted to do. on the Passover. So we see here during Josiah's reign, when they kept the Passover, they did the actual Passover sacrifice according to the law. But they also had other sacrifices and things and meats that they cooked in pots, that they sod or boiled in pots, in pans, right? They were allowed to do it. It wasn't wicked for them to do that. It was just the fact that the Passover lamb could not be sod in a pot. That had to be roasted with fire. That's why it's specific when it says, and they roasted the Passover with fire as appertaining, meaning all the different things had to be whole, right? Couldn't remain until the morning. All of that had to be done in its proper order. The other stuff was the other stuff, and that's what is being mentioned. Verse 13. So you can just link that with Exodus the 12th chapter. Exodus the 12th chapter. Verses 3 to 11. Come. Exodus chapter 12, verses 3 to 11, to link with that verse 12. Verse 12.
Verse 12.
Come.
That's the first one we did, right?
No, we read 1 Samuel's 8, 10 to 17.
Okay.
And then we also read 1 Kings 12 and 4.
Okay, that link up with 12?
No, the one that links up with verse 12 is the last one I just gave you in Exodus.
Exodus. Okay.
Right. So now, picking back up, verse 13. It says, I'm going to read 12 again. And they roasted the Passover with fire as appertaineth. As for the sacrifices, they sod them in brass pots and pans with a good savor, and set them before all the people. And afterward, they prepared for themselves and for the priests, their brethren, the sons of Aaron. Right? So those who were roasting the Passover and sodding the other sacrifices in the pots, then they had others who went and took it and prepared and placed it in front of the people so that they can go and eat the Passover lamb, as well as the other sacrifices that were sod in pots. Then they would give that for the other Levites, and then they also prepared for themselves. It's weird. It's funny as I read this because, you know, doing this for years, and Kahan Nabiyah could probably attribute to it, and Pakwai, when you go and we do the service, I'll go and I'll cook. Then we'll do the service, and then afterwards I'll serve. I'll prepare the plates where everybody could sit down and eat the food. And then at the end, I'll prepare my own plate, right? That's what it says here. Verse 13, they set them before all the people, and afterward they prepared for themselves and for the priests, their brothers, the son of Aaron. So the congregation all had their food, and then after the congregation got their stuff, then the priest went in and got theirs to eat, right? Verse 14, for the priests offered the fat until night, and the Levites prepared for themselves and the priests, their brethren, the sons of Aaron. So they were doing this all through the night. Look, when you start counting up the amount of meat and food that they had, right, that they was given by Josiah himself, then the governors, then the captains, right? That's a lot of animals that have to be slaughtered and roasted and cooked, right? And then they was doing this all night long, right? Distributing and then eating themselves of the sacrifices.
It's so interesting, like now, where they don't want to have things, and they'll have all these governors and all these heathens come to these big events, you know, these dignitaries and so on and so forth. But we had our own governors and, you know, kings and so on, priests, right, within Israel.
Gun. I mean, it's history as far as for when people start looking at the origin of things and or how long this hierarchy has been around. You know, you can go all the way back to this time. Now we're not, and it's not saying that this is the beginning of having a captain or a governor, but it's going all the way back to this period, right? Remember, even during the time of Moses, the Most High, his wife's, his father-in-law gave him wisdom about having other people set up in certain positions to go and hear matters, right? To go in some order that would be over these. This was in the law, right? So you had hierarchy even within the law of the Most High to set order so that everything wouldn't fall upon one person.
Because you can't say, I want to speak to the Most High directly.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
You got to go through the hierarchy. You got to go through the proper channel, which is Yahweh Shah. Right? That's what I think Islam does, is they try to supersede or marginalize Yahweh Shah. They say, well, why I got to go through him? I'm just going to go directly to him. We don't have to go through somebody to speak. No, we go direct. Well, the Most High set the order. Even when you read in Leviticus, 1 Corinthians 11:3, right? Christ is the head of man. The Most High is the head of Christ. That's the order, right? He himself says, I'm the door. I'm the way, the truth, the life. You can't go to the Father but through me. He set that up.
These other brothers, man, they call this, well, you know, the brothers, right? Sunni Muslim, Orthodox Muslim, Sunni Muslim. They probably went to Ishmael.
Muhammad.
They believe in Muhammad.
Right.
Most of all, when you say, anyway, need peace. But anyway, they go to other. They don't think about the Habasha.
It's interesting, and
I don't understand.
When you put it in,
think about. They say Muhammad is their messenger.
Is the last messenger, but yeah, Christ, Jesus, is the most mentioned figure in the book. He's mentioned more than anybody in the book. Jesus is.
When recognized.
Right, they marginalize it, and keep in mind that doctrine is not of the Most High anyway. Right, it's not the Most High's word. Like in the scriptures, Yahushua is the volume of the book. Right, from the beginning to end, the Alpha and Omega, right, the Ah and the Tha, right? So he comprised the book, but the Spirit has it, it's the same thing. He's the most spoken about figure in the book, but he's not reverenced that way.
I know.
He's not given that same credit.
They always speak about Muhammad,
right.
You know, the Sunni Muslim, the Orthodox Muslim, all of them, you know.
Not even that. It's like if you don't acknowledge him as the last,
they call the God Allah.
If you don't acknowledge him as the last prophet, then you're going to be cursed. Like it has nothing to do with going through Christ or following the path of Christ, following the steps of Christ to lead to righteousness. If you don't acknowledge that guy as the last prophet, then you're going to be cursed. Well, that's the rhetoric or teaching that some of them. Well, I say some because not all of them teach that, but a good portion of them say the same thing. Y'all can.
I was going to read one more thing. Talk about the hierarchy. After Exodus, after the Most High gave the 10 Commandments, right? Verse 18, Exodus 20 and 18. And all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. Verse 19. And they said unto Moses, speak thou with us, and we will hear, but let not God speak with us, lest we die. So they couldn't say they're going to run to the Most High and speak to the Most High. They got to speak to Moses.
Right.
To Moses, yeah.
If they choose, they're going to they'll get a rude awakening from the Most High if when they don't follow the way in which He wants to be worshipped.
He's the Most High set boundaries, you know, that people, not even animal, you know, not even person or beast come through, you're going to be killed.
You know, even that picture of the 10 Commandments and you know how people were very, you know, Israelite people, they were very hard-headed. He explained to them. I show you different examples, prime examples. People still not believe because when hardship came down on him, you know, they wanted to stone Moses and stuff like that. Until he opened up the sea, the last understanding they got. Otherwise, this was my Moses time say, well, this is my last thing I could do because they wouldn't want to believe him. But Most High with him in the staff, he said, and he had got that power in the scrimmage. He said, I showed you 7 times different things. You still not believe me. He said, stand back and let me show you the powers of the Lord. This is the last time to open their mind. Then their mind was open up by then.
For a short period of time.
For a short period of time. Yeah, people crazy, man.
That's why I said at the beginning of this thing, like we're a short-lived thing. We're quick to forget.
Yeah.
Quick to forget.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why it's that there's always been a constant reminding of the people in the scriptures.
Okay.
And partly because, you know, it's a generational thing where you go into captivity, and those who came out of Egypt, only 2 men made it out, Joshua and Caleb. So now all the parents of those children, they all died in the wilderness within that 40-year span. Right?
Joshua and Caleb was the only one that came
only 2 that came out of Egypt that made it into the promised land.
Oh.
So now the new generation had to be retaught, given all the law, shown the Most High, right? And then the next generation after those, they had to be reminded of the Most High. And the generations after that had to be reminded of the Most High. So where we are right now, right? In these last days, this generation has to be reminded of the realness and the power of the Most High, because they have not been taught the truth about the Most High. So now we got to come and remind them, hey, here's the real Most High. Here's the real Yahweh Shah, Jesus Christ. Here's the real children of God, or the children of the Most High. Here are the real people of the wicked, right? Here's the real judgment of the Most High. And then we reference that all the way back throughout the different periods, how it all follows suit.
So basically, as I read under the people, you know, like different people, the Arabics, they say, talk about Muhammad, you know, they talk about their book, you know. They talk about their book. I listen to hear what they be saying, because I already know the truth.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So, and they brag about, and now they're doing Ramadan now. The Muslims supposed to be doing their Ramadan.
Are you starting it?
They started Ramadan, I think it was. Somebody said it started. I know it started. They're working on it now. Putting Ramadan, they supposed to eat at 5 o'clock or something like that.
To sundown.
To sundown.
All right, so let's go back. First Esdras, we had chapter 1, and now we at verse 14.
14.
It says, for the priests offered the fat until the night, and the Levites prepared for themselves and the priests their brethren and the sons of Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
The holy singers also, the sons of Asaph, were in their order, according to the appointment of David, to wit, Asaph, Zacharias, Jeduthun, who was of the king's retinue, right? So not only did you have, like we read earlier, the confectionaries and bakers and cooks and husbandmen and all of that during the time of the Passover, you had the singers there, singing a joyful noise, like we read during the new moons, sing aloud, right? Praise the Most High with timbrels and harps and songs during that day, or psalms during that day, right? This is what they had there. They had the singers there singing, right? It says, moreover, the porters were at every gate. It was not lawful for any to go from his ordinary service, for their brethren, the Levites, prepared for them, right? So now you had the porters there to keep things in order, and no one was allowed to remove from their perch or from their from their service, because this was the order. The Levites had to have everything in its proper place, done by the order of the Most High, right? It says, thus were the things that belong to the sacrifices of the Lord accomplished in that day, that they might hold the Passover, or the Pesach, and offer sacrifices upon the altar of the Lord, according to the commandment of King Josiah. So upon repairing the temple, the holy days now had to be repaired within Israel, right? And this was one that was of a grand scale because of all the offerings that was done on that day, right? It says, So the children of Israel, which were present, held the Passover at that time and the feast of the sweet bread 7 days. Right? So you'll hear unleavened bread, right? But here it also calls it the feast of the sweet bread. Sweet bread, right? Somebody usually don't classify bread as being sweet, but you know, bread is, you make bread how you want to make it. Right? But just in understanding that the spiritualness of what this symbolizes, you know, it was pleasant for Israel to keep that feast during that time. Right? It wasn't a bitter time, it was a pleasant time, an enjoyable time. It's like it makes the comparison of the law, like when it's sweet to the mouth, but bitter in the belly, right? When you receive it and it's tasting, it tastes so good, right? So them at that time, it's like being at the feast and you having a great time. Verse 20.
So it reminds us of what happened in the past. Passover.
That
was our first big high holiday.
Yeah.
We keep doing it every year we keep doing it. This is what happened in the past.
Verse 20, it says, and such a Passover was not kept in Israel since the time of the prophet Samuel, right? So this Passover, it was not a Passover like when you read it in Kings and Chronicles, it tells you the same thing, right? You jump to it real quick.
They wasn't keeping it the right way. Also, as it should.
I think we were talking about the grandeur of it.
Con. So in 2 Chronicles chapter 35 and 18, 2 Chronicles 35 verse 18, it says, and there was no Passover like to that kept in Israel from the days of Samuel the prophet, neither did all the kings of Israel keep such a Passover as Josiah kept, and the priests and the Levites, and all Judah and Israel that were present, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Right? So it says no Passover was ever kept from the time of Samuel. Why does it say from the time of Samuel? Because from the time of Samuel is when we first instituted having kings in Israel. That's what we read in 1 Samuel, the 8th chapter. Right? So now, and then it alludes and says, neither did all the kings of Israel keep a Passover like that. Right? So
keeping the correctly way like that.
That grand. I mean, the Passover is supposed to be kept according to the law. Right? You have to roast the lamb. You got to get the bitter herbs. You have to remove the leaven. All of those are according to the ordinance. Right? If you don't keep it to the ordinance, then you're not keeping the Passover at all the right way. Right? You can't say, well, I'm going to eat the lamb, but I'm going to eat leavened bread. Then you're not keeping the feast. Right? You're doing something different. But this grand of what Josiah did, that's what it's talking about. Right? Because you had other righteous kings who would, of course, kept the Passover, but didn't keep it like offering 35,000 lambs and this 1,000 calves, and then he's offering 5,000. Right? It wasn't like that.
Imagine a kingdom.
Right. Yeah, everything in the kingdom is going to be just not even the sight. It's not even what you see. It's the energy and the vibe of the kingdom, right? It's like walking outside right now. You walk outside the door and you got to do kind of what Paquaj is doing right now. Is like look over your shoulder a bit, right? You got to be aware. You got to look and see if my car's still there. All right, nobody touched my car, right? Like you kind of just checking for things just to make sure it's the same way, right? You're going in and make sure nobody done nothing to my house, or I still got a job, and you're gonna have those types of worries and fears in the kingdom, right? Because we will be in righteousness, all in righteousness, especially those who make it out of this first hell, right? Those who are able to make it into the kingdom with Yahushua on the first wave,
Okay.
That is going to be great. Just that energy of brotherhood, just that energy of righteousness, where righteousness supersedes wickedness.
Okay.
Right now, wickedness supersedes righteousness.
Right now.
Right now. Right? It's a different mind state. Right? Just in everything, from advertisements to the messages behind certain movies or music or the stuff that you read, and all that is going to have a totally different vibe, totally different spirit. Yeah, what can I?
Yeah, I just want to read one scripture, one of my favorites. Zechariah 8:5. Zechariah 8:5. And the streets of the city shall be full of boys and girls playing in the street thereof. So if they're playing in the street, we won't have to worry about them, They'll be safe. And now kids get shot out there in the street.
Oh yeah, yes.
Was the other one that say a child should be like 200 years old or something like that?
Yeah, a child should be 100.
Yeah, 100 or 200 years old. You still be a child, an adolescent. Right now, you make it 100, man. You beat time. Because 70 is the limit. It's like you pass 70, man. You great. But then the kingdom, you'll still be considered like a child at 100.
Because Adam and Eve lived, all the years that they lived.
So now back in Esdras, First Esdras chapter 1, we have verse 22. So it says, in the 18th year of the reign of Josiah was the Passover kept. And the works of Josiah were upright before his Lord with an heart full of godliness, right? So again, this was one of the righteous kings that we had in Israel. Verse 24, as for the things that came to pass in his time, they were written in former times concerning those that sinned and did wickedly against the Lord above all people and kingdoms, and how they grieved him exceedingly, so that the words of the Lord rose up against Israel, right? So you had a lot of things that was done during Josiah's time that was also as a reminder, as well as things that would come to pass as well. Verse 25, now after all these acts of Josiah, it came to pass that Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, came to raise war at Carchemish upon Euphrates, and Josiah went out against him, right? So here it is that you have two heathens that's about to go to war. Two heathen people or rulers about to go to war. But Josiah is about to go out also in war, or to go and encounter them, right? So I'm gonna read it again. Now, after all these acts, Josiah, it came to pass that the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, came to raise war at Carchemish upon Euphrates. And Josiah went out against him, right? So he's now going to go fight against the king of Egypt, who the king of Egypt is going to go fight against somebody else, right? Over there in Assyria, which was during the time when the Babylonians would start to take over and conquer. It says, verse 26, but the king of Egypt sent to him, saying, what have I to do with thee, O king of Judea? Right? So he's like, look, what are you doing here? I got no beef with you. Why are you coming out to come engage in war with me? We got no friction, right? Verse 27, I am not sent out from the Lord power against thee, for my war is upon the Euphrates. And now the Lord is with me. Yeah, the Lord is with me, hasting me forward. Depart from me and be not against the Lord. So what is interesting is, here is this Egyptian king, Pharaoh, warning Josiah, is like, look, what are you doing here? The Most High is the one that's sending me out to go fight this war. He's urging me to go fight this. I got no beef with you, right? Depart. Everything is cool with us. But one would look at it and think that the Most High is siding with Egypt. No. Remember, it's the Most High that raises up kings and brings down kings. During the time of Nebuchadnezzar, when Daniel was dead, a vision went to Nebuchadnezzar in the dream, and Daniel came and expounded upon it. The Most High showing Nebuchadnezzar the dream, but now giving him the edification about him being a ruler, how he was going to have his reign. So that's the Most High speaking to Nebuchadnezzar, saying you're going to have a great empire. So these things came to other kingdoms, other people, with the Most High having seers or guys to kind of expound upon it for them. Same thing happened during Joseph's time. Whoever just not speaking, can you just please mute your line so we don't have any extra feedback? He did that during Joseph's time, right? To expound upon the things the Most High was going to do for them then. So here's the same thing that's happening to the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, about how he's supposed to go and fight a war that does not include or involve Israel or Josiah's. So I'm gonna read it again, verse 27. I am not sent out from the Lord power against thee, for my war is upon Euphrates, and now the Lord is with me. Yeah, the Lord is with me, hasting me forward. Depart from me and be not against the Lord. Right? So you now, it's like when Yahushua was talking with Peter, and Peter was like, nah, Lord, ain't nobody gonna come and do this. He's like, get thee behind thee, Satan, because you savors not the things of the Most High. This is the Most High's plan that this has to go this way, right? So it's the same thing here. Be not against the Most High to stop me from doing what I have to do, right? Verse 28, howbeit Josiah did not turn back his chariot from him, but undertook to fight with him, not regarding the words of the prophet Jeremy spoken by the mouth of the Lord, right? So now Jeremiah, again, like was that seer, that prophet of that time, who warned Israel, right? Who warned the people to understand what the Most High was laying down, right? He was that prophet that told them, listen, you're going to go into the captivity of the Babylonians. They was like, no, we not. And he's like, yes, you are. It'd be well favored for you if you listen to the Most High and go into this captivity under the Babylonians. If you give heed, then hey, you'll be fine. You'll still have vineyards, you'll still have children, everything will be cool. But if you go against them, then the Most High, then there's going to be judgment. And when you read, I'm sorry about that. All right, just go on mute, brother. When you go against them, then there had to be an example made of certain men, of certain people, right? So again, reading on, it says, but join battle with him in the plain of Megiddo, and the princes came against King Josiah, right? So he didn't listen to the king of Egypt, saying that this was already set in stone by the Most High, that I had to go fight this war that didn't include you. He involved himself. That's something that didn't concern him. So now he's out there in Megiddo trying to fight in this war against King of Egypt. And now they are set their sights upon him, right? So the princes came against King Josiah, the princes of Egypt. Verse 30, then said the king unto his servants, carry me away out of the battle, for I am very weak. And immediately his servants took him out of the battle. So now what happened here when he said, carry me away for I'm weak? He got wounded, right? He got wounded, he got hurt. So go to 2 Chronicles, the 35th chapter. Right. I'm going to start at 2 Chronicles chapter 35. I'm going to start at 21. 2 Chronicles 35, 21. All right. So now it's going to allude to the same things that we read here and then go further on. It says, but he sent ambassadors to him saying, what have I to do with thee, thou king of Judah? So this is again is the king of Egypt speaking to King Josiah. I come not against thee this day, but against the house wherewith I have war. For God commanded me to make haste. Forbear thee from meddling with God, who is with me, that he destroy thee not. Right? So again, the same petition, leave me well alone. Don't go against the Most High. Verse 22, Nevertheless, Josiah would not turn his face from him, but disguised himself that he might fight with him, and hearken not unto the words of Necho, which is the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, from the mouth of God, and came to fight in the valley of Megiddo. So Josiah went and disguised himself as going to be like one of the regular soldiers in the army, right? He didn't have on his kingly apparel. He put on regular apparel so that they wouldn't know who he is. Right. Verse 23. And the archers shot at King Josiah. And the king said to his servants, have me away, for I am sore wounded. Right. So in the battle, he got wounded by an arrow. Right. You usually see them when they in certain movies or adaptations, they're usually the first ones that go out. Right. They go out on the horses, or they go out, and as the other army's coming, see the archers. And all the arrows going up, and they're coming down, wounding the first line that's going out on the offense. And they out there for a while, and once they're wounded enough, then they send in the infantry, right, to go and try to go and clean it up, finish it up. Right. So this is what happened to Josiah. He got wounded being stupid, hard-headed, right? It says in verse 24, his servants therefore took him out of that chariot and put him in the second chariot that he had. And they brought him to Jerusalem, and he died and was buried in one of the sepulchres of his fathers. And all Judah and Jerusalem mourned for Josiah. And Jeremiah lamented for Josiah. And all the singing men and the singing women spake of Josiah in their lamentations to this day, and made them an ordinance in Israel. And behold, they are written in the lamentations, right? So Josiah, his death was one that was hard taken by Israel, right? So over time, when they made lamentations, or in the certain songs, when they started to speak of certain people, Josiah was always mentioned. He was in those songs that they had, and it was like one of those things where you would never forget about him. Like when Yahushua said to never forget Mary, the sister of Martha, when she went and anointed him, that wherever the gospel was preached, that we had to remember her. This is what they was doing during the when they were lamenting, that he was always remembered or mentioned because of his godliness. He was a good king. He was a righteous king that just got caught up in the end when he wasn't supposed to be there. Right? It never says that all these men were perfect. Even King Solomon had his flaw, right? David had his flaw, right? All of them had flaws, even though they were righteous men. Moses had his flaw. Aaron had his flaw, right? But they were righteous men, not to be discounted amongst the righteous, but they had sin. Yahushua was flawless, right? He was the one that was perfect. Right. So when we talk about real king of kings, or individuals or men that had no flaws, that was Yahushua. No sin. All right. So now we're going to go back to first Esdras, sorry, not second, first Esdras. And we're now back at verse 30. I stopped at verse 26. I'm sorry, 25. Come. I'm back in the Apocrypha, first chapter, 30th verse. And it reads, it says, then said the king unto his servants, carry me away out of the battle, for I am very weak. And immediately his servants took him out of the battle. Verse 31. Then gat he up upon his second chariot, and being brought back to Jerusalem, died, and was buried in his father's sepulchre. And this cat had two chariots. He went out. He must have went out and then got out of his main chariot and got in his war chariot, and then went out in the war chariot. And when he got wounded in that one, they took him out of that one and then put him in his second chariot, and that's what he went back to Jerusalem with, and died. Huh?
Probably like a pastor chariot, guys, pastor. Take him back.
Could be a faster chariot or just a, a backup chariot, a chariot the king travels in, but he doesn't go to war in, like, or it was like a, you know how when you watch, what's that movie with Ben-Hur? Was it Ben-Hur?
Yeah.
When it was fighting and going around in the things, and you're in that type of chariot, maybe he was in a chariot like that to go in the fight, as opposed to you being in your horse and carriage chariot,
Talking about the battle chariot, where he was in battle. For coming up in peace.
Right, but those are, I'm just surmising. The scriptures just say that he had 2 chariots. I'm just in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, maybe he had that chariot, but that's not written that he had a this type of chariot. He just had 2 chariots, and he took him from one and put him in the other. Okay. Right, verse 32. And in all Jewry they mourned for Josiah. Yeah, Jeremy or Jeremiah the prophet lamented for Josiah, and the chief men with the women made lamentation for him unto this day. And this was given out for an ordinance to be done continually in all the nation of Israel, like we just read in 2 Chronicles, that they made this ordinance, or this continuance of lamenting for King Josiah after his death.
Like I remember.
Sometimes you have that when people make, even today they make certain songs, and they'll replay it on the anniversary of his death or on their birthday or whatever. They just kind of continually remind themselves of how great a person this person was, and it's in song, and everybody comes together and as a memorial for it. This was something that they did back then.
Well, in a way, they're doing the same thing like on the radio today. That they do the same thing. They play their birthday and play their songs. They play their songs too, like that. Like, because they remember that they was who they was. Give them a remembering. You know what I mean? Because like you said, our people, we forget.
Yeah.
So that's why they come on and say, well, hey, Martin Gaye.
Keep in mind, like we just read how when you go through the history of Josiah, we just read about the Passover and how none of the kings ever kept a Passover like Josiah.
Right.
But he was a righteous man that went and tried to rid evil and wickedness, even those who had died out of Israel. Right. And then follows this up with a Passover that's granted. So the people at that time, they was well in favor of Josiah, most likely. Right. To see a person who gave this much or had this much given for the Most High's holy day and do all these other extensive work, they were probably heartbroken. Right. Even Jeremiah the prophet lamented, right? So it wasn't like, oh, he was just a regular. Nah, the one who was the go-between, the prophet for the Most High, he lamented for Josiah. So again, based on if you was in that time and you would have seen the things that he had done, then it would have been like, yeah, I'm gonna remember him for a minute. Now, fast forward, Yahushua comes on the scene, right? And Yahushua does all the things that he's done during his time in the earth. Now, we don't talk about Josiah like that. Who we talk about? Yahushua. Yahushua's name is the one that's remembered throughout the ages, right? Not to marginalize Josiah's, but it's just like someone after him on a much higher level came, he died, and we still remember what he did for us, right? There's still songs about Yahushua that's being sang, made new today, right? So that's just that same recourse.
It's like Josiah did what he did. It's like Yahushua did it, because whatever he did it through Yahushua. So that's why when he did it, it's just pretty much another piece of the Yahushua's book that he was able to, put it as much as we see it as big, but it was all Yahushua. Right.
Come.
He's the king of kings.
Yeah. So now we're at verse 33. It says, these things are written in the book of the stories of the kings of Judah, and every one of the acts that Josiah did, and his glory, and his understanding in the law of the Lord, and the things that he had done before, and the things now recited are reported in the book of the kings of Israel and Judea, right? So we're just letting you know that there's record of his actions when you read in the Kings, you read in the Chronicles, you read in Jeremiah, right? I want to say, I'm trying to remember, there's something in Isaiah as well, I think, that kind of alludes to him also. But it's in different books of all the things that he did before and that's mentioned now.
You might have said already, the book of Lamentations.
The book of Lamentations, right? Because it follows right behind Jeremiah, and that was during the time when the Babylonians came and actually took us over, and that was that period of time when it was heavy lamenting, or crying and sorrowing for what was going on with Israel at that time, and he would be a part of that. So now moving on to First Esdras 1, and now we have verse 34. It says, and the people took Joachaz, the son of Josiah, and made him king instead of Josiah his father, when he was 23 years old. Right? You read it in the well, you read it in the Chronicles instead of, it says here Joachaz, it's Jehoahaz or Jehoahaz in the scriptures. Now, one of the things with the kings had different names when you read it. Like Josiah's had another name, or Hezekiah had another name, Zedekiah had another name. It was like different names or surnames that they would have. Some of them that the heathen would put upon them, like during the time of Daniel and exactly, right? All of these just had surnames. So if you read through Kings and the Chronicles, sometimes if you're paying close attention to the kings themselves, you have to be careful and read it with favor, because sometimes the names flip around and you're thinking it's somebody totally different when it's talking about the same person, just a different name, right? And I remember years ago when we was going through that, it was a confusion to certain people because of the different names. But if you just have it where you write down all their surnames or the names that they have, and then it kind of fall in a line and you'll understand what's going on. But again, 34, and the people took Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, and made him king instead of Josiah, his father, when he was 23 years old. And I remember one of the things that was a stumbling block, well, I forget which king it was. I don't know if it was Josiah or whatever, but it talks about him being king at 8 years old and another one being king at 18 years old, right? And it's just understanding the numbers and the Hebrew and things at the time was going on, but we'll go into that another time. But this just reminds me that because he said he was 23 years old and he was young. Verse 35, but even being 23 and young, what you usually always had was counselors. You had people who was there that was of the king's court who just didn't leave you to yourself, right? It wasn't like he's the king and now he's sitting up there. He could be 18 years old, 17 years old. He don't know anything about it. And it's like, nah, you had counselors or people who were advisors to the king to kind of guide them through the law of what they're supposed to do. Khan, Pakwa den Yawa Kanan.
He was 23, but mature enough to run Israel, like you were saying. But he appointed people that he believed would be good counsel, to him to advise him. It's just like in any, even here, you have the president. The president is old, but he still have a cabinet. He still have people who advise him. But he made the final decision after he gets counsel.
Hold on, yeah, well, right?
Yeah, because even back in verse 15, it says, "Who was the king's retinue?" Retinue is like a group of advisors, assistants, or other accompanying an important person.
Khan.
Yeah, retinue, advisors.
And also keep in mind, Josiah, he reigned for 31 years, right? So him reigning for that long a period of time, his son was 23, around 23 years old when he died. He would have been around his father to understand the orders and the affairs of what's going on, right? So it was just like how we read in the Apocrypha about Mattathias, and also in Ecclesiasticus, as far as for how a father's son follows in his steed, being just like him, right? Even if he dies, he's now just like his dad, because he learned of all the things that was necessary if his father was to die. Now he can go on and take hold of the family, or take hold of the empire or the kingdom, right? Because he's now been ruled. Usually the firstborn always has that first right to do that. The firstborn son is the one who's now to that chief role, that leadership role, that king position, right?
Yeah, like some of us now, I mean, like a lot of us now, we have children, you know, and we want to teach them things so when we go, they can know something,
yep,
you know, about the law.
So now I'm back again reading. We have verse 35. It says, and he reigned in Judea and in Jerusalem 3 months. And then the king of Egypt deposed him from reigning in Jerusalem. And he set a tax upon the land of 100 talents of silver and 1 talent of gold. Right? This is 35 and 36 I just read. Right? First Esdras chapter 1, verses 35 and 36. So, and Joachaz now stepping into the throne. After 3 months, the king of Egypt came and deposed him, right? And then set a tax upon the land, right? I'm gonna read this in 2 Chronicles, the 36th chapter. And 1. 2 Chronicles 36 and 1. So it says, then the people of the land took Jehoahaz, which is the same Jehoahaz that we just read, the son of Josiah, and made him king in his father's stead in Jerusalem. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. And the king of Egypt put him down at Jerusalem and condemned the land in 100 talents of silver and 1 talent of gold. So it says that he put him down, and then it says he condemned the land. When it says he condemned the land, it's the same thing as he's saying here. He put a tax upon the land of this silver and gold that they had to pay, right? Then it says in verse 4, and the king of Egypt made Elkanah, his brother, king over Judah and Jerusalem, and turned his name to Joachim. See, his name was Elkanah, but then the king of Egypt changed his name Jehoiakim. And Necho took Jehoahaz, his brother, and carried him to Egypt, right? So he disposed him of being king, made his brother king, changed his name, and then took him, and he was now being held bound in Egypt.
Nothing.
Right.
Would he be held at nothing when he did that?
Say again?
Would he be held at nothing when he did that?
Would he be held at nothing?
Because he took his kingship away.
Right. Yeah, he took it away. He was king, and now you're not king no more. Now you're going to be bound or held here in Egypt. I'm pretty sure he didn't want to go to Egypt. He didn't want to get disposed or deposed from his position.
Well, that king had, he had the opportunity to do that to him, right?
Right. Now, keep in mind at this time that from the time of Josiah till all this is going on, there's also another great empire that's coming up, right? Remember, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, went to go fight down at the Euphrates at that place, Carchemish, right? That was where the Assyrians area was, that the Babylonians now is coming in to conquer. It wasn't like an immediate conquer, right? You don't read, we'll read and say, yeah, the Babylonians took the Assyrian empire, but it takes years. It's not something that just happens over a day or a week or a month. It's a campaign that goes on for a while.
It's just expression.
Right, it's an expression. So now when you read about King of Egypt there, he's still around at this time where another great king who's coming up is about to take over that whole region and him. Right? So when we read about the Assyrian rule, we know that the Babylonians came and conquered the Assyrians. This is in that region and the start around that conflict of them going to war. Right? So here, again, where it says Jehoiakim is now the new one that's placed in that position. Okay. All right. So now let's go back to First Esdras in the Apocrypha. We at the 37th verse.
And one more thing, usually when it's a custom of the heathen, when they go and take over a government, the leader of that government, they give them exile in another neighboring country. So that once they remove the leader, and then they quell any opposition. But if they leave the leader in the country, then there's a chance that he might rise. The people might rise up again, and he might take on. Help him out. Right.
Come.
Strike the head.
So reading on, this is First Esdras 1, and we have verse 37 again. It says, the king of Egypt also made Jehoiakim his brother king of Judea and Jerusalem. And he bound Jehoiakim and the nobles, but Zacharias, his brother, he apprehended and brought him out of Egypt. All right, so this is all the king of Egypt. Now they're setting up certain people, removing them out of the way, right? For what other different things that's going on internally with them, which you can also read in the histories. Verse 39, 25 years old was Jehoiakim when he was made king in the land of Judea and Jerusalem. And he did evil before the Lord, right? So here comes now an evil one that's being placed into the position of king in Israel. Verse 40, wherefore against him Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came up and bound him with the chain of brass and carried him unto Babylon. So now we're not talking about the king of Egypt no more, because on the back burner, what's happening? The Babylonians are starting to come and conquer, right? So it's not the Egyptians that's now having a way with the kings of Judea, but now it's the Babylonians. So now he's being bound and taken. It's coming to it towards the end. Right, this is around that same time, the 70 years. Remember, this is around the time of Jeremiah, because we read that who was lamenting for Josiah? Jeremiah. Jeremiah was there, right? Then it says in verse, I'm going to read 40 again. Wherefore against him Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came up and bound him with the chain of brass and carried him away and carried onto Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also took of the holy vessels of the Lord and carried them away and set them in his own temple at Babylon, right? So this is now the desecrating of the temple, them going in and pillaging, which is going to lead up to the destruction of the temple.
Like you said, it takes time, because they've been campaigning against the temple for a minute.
Yeah.
They just didn't take it over all the way. Like in the time of Daniel, when they took him and his friends, that was way before the destruction. That was like in the early 600s BC. It wouldn't be overthrown until the 586. Exactly.
Right. So and it's a good point that Kahan mentions that, because sometimes you lose sight of time based on when you read. You just read, and now Jehoiakim is taken out, and this one comes in, and this one comes. There's months and years that go on between this happening, right? You gotta put it in a time frame, and then also pair this with the history of the Babylonians and their war to conquering back then. Remember, I always make mention of that when you look at world history is contained throughout the Old Testament, New Testament, and the books of the Apocrypha. But in the world history, it's mainly showing you where Israel fits into what's going on, right? So now as Babylon is coming up and conquering, look, This is what they was doing to the kings. They was deposing kings and setting up kings and putting kings in captivity and doing something else to somebody's eyes, and they were doing all this stuff. Whereas if you just go and take a class on world history and you just read about them, you don't get this part. You don't get this part. You don't get the whole intricate part of how it pertains to our history and what goes on with our rulerships. So if you get the make sure I get it good. You get the Zondervan's Bible dictionary here, where it gives you the breakdown of the different kings and their rulerships, the years present. Here from the kings of Judah and their prophets. Right, I think you'll see them here on the sides of them, where it mentions Zechariah, Haggai, Malachi, so forth and so on, who were contemporaries around the same times of these kings that were ruling. So you can read this if you have a Zondervan's Bible Dictionary in pages 477, where it gives you this illustration. That way, so when you're the prophets, that's why when you're reading it, what did I say?
No, you're right. I'm just get the right page. Just saying, look under the word prophets.
Oh, under the definition for prophets. That way, when you read the prophets, when you read Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Malachi, you now can, in your mind, frame it how it aligns with what you read in the Kings and the Chronicles. Because when you read it separately, you're reading it in your mind. Sometimes you read it separately, but you don't know that Isaiah fits in with King Uzziah and this king over here. And so as you're reading in Kings, Isaiah is right there, right? When you're reading this about Josiah and the other king, he's right there. Jeremiah is there, along with these other prophets of that time who were contemporaries.
And the letters of the epistles that are in the New Testament, you can do the same thing. Check out when those are written, and you have to parallel them with the Acts of the Apostles. It's the same kind of relationship. The Paul wrote those different letters going different journeys. Certain letters he wrote maybe during his first or second journey. Other ones he might have wrote during his third or fourth journey.
So now let's go back to our first Esdras 1, and we have verse 39. Read that again and move forward. 25 years old was Jehoiakim when he was made king in the land of Judah and Jerusalem, and he did evil before the Lord. Wherefore against him Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came up and bound him with a chain of brass and carried him unto Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also took of the holy vessels of Yahweh and carried them away and set them in his own temple at Babylon. But those things that are recorded of him and of his uncleanness and impiety are written in the Chronicles of the Kings, right? So you can read them in 2 Chronicles, it's 36th chapter. You can read them also in Kings, I forget which chapters off the top of my head, that goes through what happened around the time of Josiah all the way to the last king, which includes Jehoiakim. Verse 43, and Jehoiakim, his son, reigned in his stead, and he was made king being 18 years old, right? So now here, again, you start to see the names repeat themselves. It's the same thing when you have certain kings' names or the sons be the same, but they had their own names. It's just, again, don't look at it as confusing. Just know that names were surnames attached to these kings. But here you'll read that it says that here he was 18 years old when he was made king. And then when you read it in 2 Chronicles, it says he was 8 years old when he was made king, right? It says when he began to reign, right? So now there's two ways and contexts of looking at 8 years old or 18 years old, because some, like when you read in the Apocrypha and Maccabees with Antiochus, some are groomed to be a king starting at a certain age, right? You know you are already assured to be a king, looked at as a king, but you have to be groomed to be a king. That at a certain point, now you have the rulership. So you can look at it and say when he was grown to be a king or when he actually became king. Two different things, right? And then when you look at the Hebrew, for the word, the number 8 and 18, the numbers are the wording is interchangeable. For 8 and 18, when you look it up in the Hebrew, I remember we did this research years ago. It'd be good to go do it again, and you'll be like, oh, okay, I see where that's the way it is. Kahan Nabiyah. Oh, okay.
I was just gonna say stead.
Instead of Steve.
Yes.
So now, what did I leave off? I was at 43. Come. Now we have verse 44. It says, and he reigned but 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem and did evil before the Lord. Right. So there's a succession of evil Judite kings, which is prominent with the kings of Israel, but you still had a good number of righteous kings that were in the kingdom of Judah. Right. It says, verse 45. So after a year, Nebuchadnezzar sent and caused him to be brought into Babylon with the holy vessels of the Lord. So he already taken some of them. They left it there. Another king comes, sets up. So one could surmise that Israel rededicated some more vessels back to the temple and put it back in there. And then he now took him out, deposed him, and took more holy vessels along with him. Right? Yeah, remember, this is the most holiest temple of all the world, the most famous temple it was of all the world, right? Certain people go, you know how you have certain monuments or certain attractions in different places where you want to go to the Vatican, right? I want to go see the Church of the Vatican, or I want to go see this clock in this place, or the Taj Mahal over. Yeah, you know, everyone has their attraction for certain reasons and certain things. But back then in ancient times, it was known that the temple that was in Israel was the most famous, most holiest temple of them all. This was the wonder of the world. Outside of the people, this was the most grand thing that we had. That's why when we just read in the last chapter of Maccabees, they was like, look, we ain't fighting for our wives and our children, which most people would be doing, right? You like, yo, these people coming to try to destroy us and destroy our houses and our holy buildings and everything else. Man, I'm going to go and defend my family and my honor and my name. Most people would do that. But Israel was like, nah, we fighting for the holy temple, that they don't come and destroy the holy temple, right?
Oh, we had temple guards too, you know?
Yeah, the Levites was the guards, because the Levites used to fight too. They were soldiers and warriors as well. They went out to war.
You know, this is a picture of one of the president of Haiti. He got elected. He succeeded his father when he was 19.
Yeah, 19 years old, and now he's a king. But I'm pretty sure behind him, or that's going to be around, he's going to have advisors.
Yeah, that's how he just took over, but the advisors were already there.
Yeah.
And he ruled longer than his father. He ruled for 15 years.
Yeah.
So that just being young is not
right.
It's not the problem.
Exactly. You know what this reminds me of? Just in entertainment, in Game of Thrones, the young queen who I forget her name.
He answered the call.
Yes.
Yes. Answered the call.
Yes. Yes.
She's a beast.
She had more will than a lot of the other people that was in that room. She was the youngest of them all, and the queen of her own realm, of her own area. But yeah, you like, man, this little young girl over here, she got that fire. She got that wisdom.
Yeah, older men like shame.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, you're right. Just the youth doesn't always equate to someone's wisdom. King David, right? King David was one who Samuel didn't really think was gonna be a king over his brothers, but he was the one, right?
Or Saul was looking at David too.
Mm-hmm.
Young.
Right.
Yeah, it's got a scripture on that. Elihu, son of Barakol, the Buzite, he said to Job and his friends, the same with Job chapter 32. I'm not sure if it links to what we're talking about. Job chapter 32, I'll just read 6 to 9. Job chapter 32, verse 6. It reads, Elihu, son of Barakal, the Buzite, answered and said, I am young and you are very old, talking to Job and his friends. Wherefore I was afraid and durst not show you mine opinion. Verse 7. I said, days should speak, and multitude of years should teach wisdom. Verse 8. But there is a spirit in man, and the inspiration of the Almighty giveth them understanding. Verse 9. And judgment.
And also, when we said 8 years old, yeah, it was like you said, Consummate. He was start learning the ins and outs at 8 years old. And then by the time he get to that place, he's done master this thing by the time he get to the point where right. And just having other people around and books and people you can learn from, you don't have to have the actual experience, but you borrow from other people's experience and you read about them and you use what the information that was already there and you get insight on how you're gonna move forward.
Right.
But this is a big stumbling block, or used to be a stumbling block for the gainsayers, as far as for the validity of the scriptures. They were like, see here, they'll go on to get those books about, back in the day, they used to have books before the internet was so prevalent. They used to have the books about 100 questions to ask a Hebrew Israelite or whatever, right? Or pamphlets. Yeah, you got one, right? And then in there, it would be one of those things of comparing verse for verses, where it says 8 here, but it says 18 here. See, what's that? How can this be the pure book if it says 8 here and 18 here? Right. But the context surrounding it is what they don't pay attention to. Right?
Officially 18.
Yeah. Or like we just read last week, where it says, oh, and he came into Jerusalem with a coat and an ass. But in the other one, it just said it was just on a coat. Right. What's that? Right. Wait, is it 2 or is it 1? Which one? Right. Can't be both. It got to be one or the other. But why that one? I see, and then see, there you go. Right? No context, no understanding behind it. Right? That's like me and I'm talking to Kanabiya, and I'm like, yeah, me and Pakwa went in the store to get some food, and such happened. But I don't say Yahweh Kanan was there along with Pathak, but they were there. Right. But because I said me and Pakwa, see, he just said me and Pakwa. I didn't say that they weren't there. Nah, brother, it's not right. It gotta be everything. It has to be a 1-for-1, and they're simple-minded. That's just a thing that just trip people up who are not in the spirit of how the things are written in the scriptures. All right, let's go back to First Esdras 1. We have verse. What did I leave off? Verse. Khan.
Shalom, Elder. Shalom, Kahans and Shalom Israelites.
Shalom,
Love here. Job 32, 6 and 9. What verse was that for?
Job 32, 6 and 9. I would say you can link that up with verse where it says 43.
43.
Right, and the reason why 43 is because it talks about him being 18 years old. And I mentioned in the link with this is 2 Chronicles 36 and 9, where it says that he was 8 years old. So now when we deal with age for a person to be now in the position of a king, you don't always have to just look at him being that young, because wisdom is what speaks. Wisdom is what carries a person, right? That's like in the Apocrypha, it says, praise no man before you hear him speak, right? Because you want to see what comes forth out of his mouth. Right. Just like how we alluded to the person in the Game of Thrones. You sitting around, you're just like, who's this little girl in here? And all of a sudden she opened her mouth, you're like, yo, dang, I feel like an idiot. I feel so small right now. I feel embarrassed because of the wisdom that's coming out. Right? So that's what that links up with, verse 43. So now we have verse 44.
we gotta do that too when we deal with our family and friends in the world, and even heathen that'll say or do something where it's like you gotta acknowledge it.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean, oh, you're better than me, or you're gonna be my slave. Like, no, what they said was on point based on scripture.
Yeah.
Acknowledge it.
Yeah, okay.
I was going to read something quickly. When it says Numbers 6 and 10, it says, "You shall bring 2 turtles." So people think it says like turtles.
Right.
It's like, it says turtles right there.
Right.
And they're reading the Hebrew, it's like turtles, though.
Total doves.
So people
Right.
like get tripped off by it. It says 2 turtles.
Right.
That's what the Most High said. That's what it says in the scripture.
So no, he's supposed to go get a turtle.
Yeah.
So this is why me personally, when you read in Isaiah 28, and it says that when they read it, when they go back and read, it'll be a snare and a trap, right? Because I firmly believe it's certain things like that that's left in the scriptures for that particular purpose, right? You say to yourself, well, why didn't it say turtle doves? Right? If it meant turtle doves, why did you say turtles? Because I was going to go out there and grab a turtle to go sacrifice it. But if you read according to the scriptures, precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little, there a little, you would understand that it's talking about turtle doves, right? And all scripture is given by inspiration of the Most High. So if the Most High wanted just to say turtles, he wanted to say turtles for a reason. Right? Because he wanted you to do a little bit more study and an investigation as to what is really meant there. If you don't, which most people who are not in the spirit don't do, they just take it up for face value, right? They just take John 3:16 for face value. They just take, search scripture for face value and no context, no study, and no precept upon precept, and they get snared and trapped. So it's for that purpose that I know that the Most High has that in there to get people to stumble on the word. Because they don't have that, they were not given the spirit. Yep. Seeker of the truth. All right, verse 44. And reigned but 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem, and did evil before the Lord. So after a year, Nebuchadnezzar sent and caused him to be brought into Babylon with the holy vessels of the Lord, and made Zedekiah king of Judea and Jerusalem, when he was 21 years old, and he reigned 11 years. And he did evil also in the sight of the Lord, and cared not for the words that were spoken unto him by the prophet Jeremy from the mouth of the Lord. Right? So here, during Zedekiah's time, Zedekiah was the last king, right? Last king that we had in Israel. Right. So when you go into the Kings and the Chronicles, you go into the book of Jeremiah's, you read about the storyline centered around Zedekiah's. The Most High at this time was warning or prophesying to Israel about the Babylonian captivity coming. Right. And the men that were around Zedekiah didn't agree with it. Right. To the point that they went and bound and locked Jeremiah's up at times. Right. And when you read it, even sometimes the heathen had to get him out of jail. Like his own people didn't get him out. They was like wicked as all hell. So at a certain point, Zedekiah made an oath or a pact with Nebuchadnezzar that they would be in league, right? That they would never have any, disagreements or whatever. So there was an oath made between the two. And then the reinforcement came with Jeremiah to say, listen, keep with this thing. But Zedekiah kept listening to the noise around him of these other men that said, nah, we ain't never going under the Babylonians. It ain't going to happen. So it caused Zedekiah to go and start making alliances with the Egyptians and to dissimulate from the Babylonians, which went against the word of the Most High, right? Let alone as Zedekiah, who was doing evil anyway, but he now was breaking oaths and making alliances against the will of the Lord, right? Again, this was what the Egyptian king in the beginning has said, don't fight against the Most High. Don't bear a grudge against the Most High. Don't meddle against what the Most High set up. And that's what he did when you read the history around Zedekiah. He called it was him listening to the people around him.
The advisors.
His advisors.
Oh, okay.
His advisors counseled him wrong. Jeremiah, the prophet, who was a man of the Most High, was advising him the right way. He didn't want to listen to that, right? So I'm gonna read it again. It says,
Isaiah 31:1.
say again.
Isaiah 31:1. It says, "Woe to them that go down to Egypt for help, and stay on horses, and trust in chariots, because they are many, and in horsemen, because they are very strong. But they look not unto the Holy One of Israel, neither seek the Lord."
Perfect scripture. So here it is that they made an alliance, or Zedekiah was going to make an alliance with the Egyptians to go and fight against the Babylonians. Whereas the Most High said, nah, it'll be well with you if you stay under them. So he went and broke the oath and then went to go and now side to go and fight against the Babylonians. So I'm going to read it again, verse 4. And he did evil before the Lord. So after a year, Nebuchadnezzar set and caused him to be brought into Babylon with the holy vessels of the Lord, and made Zedekiah king of Judea and Jerusalem when he was 21 years old, and he reigned in 11 years. And he did evil also in the sight of the Lord, and cared not for the words that were spoken unto him by the prophet Jeremy from the mouth of the Lord. And after that, King Nebuchadnezzar had made him to swear by the name of the Lord, he forswore himself and rebelled, and hardened his neck and his heart. He transgressed the laws of the Lord power of Israel. So Israel is in a bad state now because of him breaking the oath, him listening to these advisors and men that were around during this time. It says in verse 49, the governors also of the people and the priests, and of the priests, did many things against the laws, and passed all the pollutions of all nations, and defiled the temple of the Lord, which was sanctified in Jerusalem. So now the spirit of Israel just started to go down way. Because now the governors is doing wickedness, the priest is doing wickedness, pollution started to exceed what the heathen was doing. So now what was going to be left, right? When when the Most High sees that we're not in tune with him, then it's like captivity, plague, death is imminent, right? Always, it was always imminent. Yeah, sword, famine, pestilence.
So, I mean, what makes his job as the king difficult? I mean, not difficult, because at the end of the day, you have advisors advising you from many sides. And they're very convincing in their arguments. So now at the end of the day, for example, I had a president said he sit down and listen to advice. He can spend all day listen to everybody. He says nothing. He just listen. This one made his point, this one made his point, and then he pick up and leave. Then you gotta go and try to reconcile what this guy say versus what this guy say versus what this guy say, and then he gotta come up with a decision. So he doesn't have to make it the decision that somebody told him. And one advisor said, you can tell the president whatever you want. At the end of the day, he doesn't have to take it. It's his final decision because he's listened to so many people.
So, but the difference with the kings of Israel is that they always had men of the Most High, prophets there, right? Where they went to go seek from the Most High, right? So you'll have these advisors around for certain things, but things on a grand scale, you go and seek wisdom from the Most High. Jeremiah was there. Jeremiah told him, listen, this is what needs to happen. This is thus saith the Lord. Thus saith the Most High. So now when it comes to thus saith the Most High, y'all need to shut up, man. Y'all need to get out of my ear. If y'all don't like it, take it up with the Most High. This is what the Most High said. But what happens, the same thing befell Saul, where he began to fear the people more than fearing the Most High, because they right there in his face, right? They're right there ever before him consistently day by day. Whereas when they got upset, they went and threw Jeremiah in the doggone prison. So you don't have to see or hear him no more, right? Then Jeremiah had to have Baruch go out and start teaching and speaking to the people, right? On behalf of what he was saying. And the Baruch was now the mouth. But they still ain't want to hear it. So it was like, all right.
That's why it's very important. The other day I said it, it's like we got to find out, how our people who are over people in the, you know, Caribbean, where most of our people are, a lot of our people are. You got to see how they ruling and find out what's going on behind the scene in their, you know, the political things. Because I know for experience, I've seen a lot of things that president over there is doing, but things that he wants to do, he can't do, because the minute that he does it, the people are gonna, you know, rally and they're gonna kick him out. Now he finds himself in a tough situation.
Yeah.
Whether should he make the right decision, or should he make the decision that appease the people?
Right.
So it's just very, very, very.
Well, that's the same thing that's the same thing that happened to in the Apocrypha when when Jonathan was apprehended and he was taken, and Simon knew that, listen, he's gonna be killed. They're using this as a pawn. But he was in the same thing, was like, listen, if I don't go and send them his sons and this tribute money, then his death is going to be blamed on me, right? I know that they just playing me out, but I got to keep the solidarity of the people, right? If I don't do it, then woe is me, because now they're not going to stand behind me. If I do it, his son's going to get killed. He's going to get killed anyway. Now he got money. I'm at a loss for that. So he was in a lose-lose situation. But how much should I lose here and how much should I lose there? I'm going to lose this one already. That's his brother. I'm going to lose this one already. His nephews he's sending to the enemy. I'm going to lose this one already. But for the nation, I got to just take that one. So yeah, you're right. In certain circumstances, it's a tough decision to make, where you have to think rationally and clearly. And in some cases, wisdom is not always there with everybody. Like, it was there with Simon to make the decision to do what he needed to do, but with Zedekiah, nah, he didn't think rationally.
And one last time, I heard the president say, you know, that being the president is like it's a lonely situation. It's a lonely position, because you got everybody telling you all kinds of things. At the end of the day, it's you and the Most High. It's you and the Most High that you got to make. And whatever decision, you got to be ready for the backlash that's gonna come up.
Yeah. When you in a lead position, right? I mean, you think of in a small scale when you I don't know, a manager at a store, or principal in a school, or captain of a sports team. You know, when people look at it, they're like, yeah, it all falls on me. And usually, when if they're good leaders, they take the weight upon themselves. Right? When a ship fall or something happened, they're like, don't blame them. It was all my fault. Right? And it may not be their fault. But as a good leader, you're going to say, hey, it's my fault. I take the blame. I take the brunt, because that's why I'm put in this position. That's why you put there, to take the good with the bad, and not the, you know, because if you notice it, sometimes when people start turning on their own people and start pointing the fingers and throwing them under the bus, it's like, nah, man, why would he do that? I don't want to go follow under him. I want to have him as my leader, and he do the same thing to me. Right. So you want that leader, that person in authority, to take that weight. So yeah, if you are in that position, you got to know that you going in there with no vest on. Like some people say, you going in a bulletproof vest, you're gonna get you got to take the vest off, because you're going to get shot. They throwing the darts. It's coming. Every decision is going to have scrutiny, because you're not going to appease everybody. In these carnal positions, you're not going to be able to appease everybody, because there's so many different factions that have priorities that go against what the other one is. So you make this decision that may be in favor of them, they're going to be mad, and they're going to criticize and march or slogan or do. Then you do it for him, they're going to be mad. It's very rare that you do something that appeases everybody. In this setup, in this wicked setup, it's very rare that it happens. Y'all can on.
Yeah, I just want to read this quickly. Jeremiah 28:9. It says, the prophet will prophesy of peace when the word of the prophet shall come to pass. Then shall the prophet be known that the Lord has truly sent him. Verse 10. Then Hananiah the prophet took the yoke from off the prophet Jeremiah's neck and break it. And Hananiah spake in the presence of all the people, saying, Thus said the Lord, even so will I break the yoke of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, from the neck of all nations within the space of 2 full years. And the prophet Jeremiah went his way. So they listened to the Hananiah as if it's a prophet. Then the word of the Lord came unto Jeremiah the prophet, saying, after that Hananiah the prophet had broken the yoke from off the neck of the prophet Jeremiah, saying, go and tell Hananiah, saying, thus said the Lord, thou hast broken the yokes of wood, but thou shalt make for them yokes of iron. So they figured out peace, or Hananiah, like, he's right. You're gonna break this yoke, put some iron on it.
Take this wood off and put some iron there.
So as if we're not going into the captivity.
Yeah. Come.
That's like the, not in Isaiah 31, but Isaiah 30. The prophesy not unto us right things, speak unto us
smooth things.
Prophesy this.
Right. Give us what we want to hear.
Now we need
don't really need to hear. Give me what we want to hear.
We don't want to go to captivity.
So back in 1 Esdras chapter 1, we have verse 48 again. It says, and after that, King Nebuchadnezzar had made him to swear by the name of the Lord. He forswore himself and rebelled and hardened his neck and his heart, and he transgressed the laws of the power of the Lord. The governors also of the people and of the priests did many things against the laws and passed all the pollutions of all nations and defiled the temple of the Lord, which was sanctified in Jerusalem. Nevertheless, the power of their fathers sent by his messengers to call them back, because he spared them at his tabernacle also, right? So now, even if they did all of this, he's giving them a space to repent, right? Sent Jeremiah to say, hey, listen, if you guys stop this, everything will go well with you, right? But it says in verse 51, but they had his messengers in derision, and look, when the Lord spake unto them, they made a sport of his prophets, right? So this is what we talked about. What they did to those who came, specifically Jeremiah, when he came to give them the word of the Lord. After they threw him in the prison and he came out, he still went back to them and warned them, look, it can go well if you just listen, right? But they made sport of him. So now after they did that, the Most High gave them an opportunity to change their thinking. It says in verse 52, so far forth that he, being wroth with his people for their great ungodliness, commanded the kings of the Chaldees, or the Babylonians, to come up against them. So the Most High was done. He was like, all right, that's it, right? I tried to be patient with you, tried to be lenient, gave you the prophets, gave you the word, right? Still disobeyed. So now I'm about to go tell these guys over here to come up against you, right? Verse 53, who slew their young men with the sword, yeah, even within the compass of their holy temple, and spared neither young men nor maid, old man nor child among them, for he delivered all into their hands. So when you look at the Babylonian, because it says young men nor maid nor young woman, right? Old man nor child. They killed everybody of different classes and ages, right? They didn't have any discretion. Usually when you go into war, they'll be like, all right, this is just among men, no women, children. We ain't gonna do nothing to the women. They killed the women and the children. But now, why did they kill the women and the children? Disobedience. So the Most High put that spirit in them to do that, because he was wroth with his people. This was now an example, so that even us reading today, we see that the Most High don't play. The Most High don't play. They didn't just arbitrarily out of their own heart say, we're just going to come up and do this. The scriptures say that the Most High commanded the king of the Chaldees. Remember, he controls the hearts and minds of the children of men. So he commanded them to go and do this to our ancestors back then, and they did it to the T as the Lord commanded. Pequod and Yahukanan.
And also, in general, the Most High is dealing with everybody, including the nations. And when I say that is, the Most High control everything. Not dealing as in terms of they are his people, but he's dealing with everybody in their respective position.
Right. And this is why when we read earlier with Josias, this was a war that the Most High had sent him to go fight against the Babylonians. And he told Josias, ain't got nothing to do with you. The Most High sent me here. So the same way how the Most High is commanding the Babylonians to come up against the children of Israel, he commanded the Egyptians to go fight against them in Assyria, which was the Babylonians coming up. So you're right. The Most High is the one who orchestrates everything, right? So that it can now fulfill the word of the Most High. The Most High said, hey, the Babylonians are going to rule for a time. Don't you think the Babylonians got to go out there and conquer and kill people and take over lands and regions? Don't you think if now the Persians and the Medes is going to be the next succession, that they now have to go and conquer them and all their allies? And it continues on and on and on until you get to the final people who are ruling, and then what's going to happen afterwards. So over time, as the Most High is controlling all these people, when we start getting into the final fulfillment of what Gog and Magog and Togarmah and all of them is going to be doing in their rightful place in the Third World's War, you see that the Lord is controlling that what's going over in that region. He's controlling what's going on in that region. He's putting the spirit in the Moab to do what they're doing. He's putting the spirit in the Russians to do what they're doing. All this is being controlled. It right now may not have a direct impact or reflection of us. They're not saying, hey, we got to go fight against those blacks in America. Nah. They fighting amongst themselves and jockeying for position and forming allies in certain areas to prepare themselves for what's coming.
No nation is doing their own thing.
Nah. It's all a spirit, and so I see your hand. It's all a spirit that the Most High puts in different channels, right? He'll use Yahushua to put out that righteous channel with the righteous angels. He'll use Satan to put out that deceitful spirit and different angels, the evil angels, to go and do the thing that they're doing, right? The Most High is sending out the word for everything to culminate into how it's supposed to play out, right? The scriptures. Yeah. Yahukanan.
Yes, Deuteronomy 28 and 50. It says, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young.
Right. What's that scripture? Let me think. How it described I think it's in Jeremiah. No. Remember, I think try and remember the description for the Chaldees, the Babylonians. I know they're called the Destroying Mountain, but I think they also referred to as a lion as well. I can't remember where. It might be in Jeremiah. I'll find it a little later. So reading on, we have verse 54. A link?
Yeah, not for verse 53, but just going into, y'all talking about the Most High control, the king? Going into the king that he would raise up to take out these Babylonians later. This is Isaiah 44, 28, and Isaiah 45 and 1. So last verse of chapter Isaiah 44 and the first verse of Isaiah 45.
44 and 28.
Yeah. In Isaiah 45 and 1. It reads, Isaiah 44 and verse 28. That saith of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, he shall perform all my pleasure. Even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple thy foundation shall be laid. Isaiah 45 and 1. Thus saith Yahweh to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue the nations before him, And I will loose the loins of kings to open before him the two left leave gates, and the gate shall not be shut. On the tower of Babylon, Belshazzar. Is Nebuchadnezzar's son is going to be taken out.
They're gonna link up with 53.
I said it links with just what you were talking about, the Most High being in control.
Okay.
Show you the king, the heathen king, and the Most High servant too.
The heathen king.
Yeah. That's what you just read.
45.
45 and 1.
You linked it to the side.
Okay.
Oh, it's anointed. Look, it's a heathen that's anointed. It's chosen.
Chosen for that position.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's in
So that was Isaiah 44:21 and also Isaiah 45 and 1. So I'm sorry, 44:28 and Isaiah 45 and 20 and 45 and 1.
Right.
As it pertains to how the Most High controls all the other nations and how they are also chosen to do certain things according to his will.
Fine.
So now reading on in verse 55, it says, as for the house of the Lord, they burnt it and break down the walls of Jerusalem and set fire upon her towers, right? So now we see before they were just taking holy vessels out of the temple. Now they went and burnt it, right? Destroyed it, right? So now you could link this with First Esdras, the 4th chapter. First Esdras, the 4th chapter. I'm gonna read from 44 to 45. First Esdras chapter 4, 44 to 45. Right. So this is now the follow-on after the temple, or after the temple was burnt. Right. The Persians and the Medes come into power. Right. And it falls right into what Kahan Nabiyah just read in Isaiah 45 and 1, where Cyrus was one of the anointed or chosen of the Most High. And what Cyrus did, Cyrus and Darius, what they did was allow, through the prophecy or the word of the Most High coming to them, to allow Israel to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild and repair Jerusalem. After what we just read, that the Babylonians or the Chaldeans burnt up the temple. So it says here in First Esdras 4 and 44, and to send away all the vessels that were taken away out of Jerusalem, which Cyrus set apart when he vowed to destroy Babylon, and to send them again thither. So Cyrus made a vow that he would get those same vessels and give and dedicate others back to Jerusalem, right? After they destroyed Babylon. Verse 45, thou also hast vowed to build up the temple which the Edomites burned when Judea was made desolate by the Chaldees. So this is what we just read in the 1st chapter, that said that the Babylonians burnt it, right? But now it wasn't just only the Babylonians that burnt it. The Babylonians went in to destroy, but the Edomites came and burnt it. But it fell all under the Babylonians, right? It fell under what the Babylonians did, but the Edomites was right there to go in and assist them in destroying, and they went and burnt the temple. They were there with the Chaldees. After the Chaldees went and destroyed, here came the Edomites and did what they did. So this here is what you read that happened. Say it again in Elkanan.
Oh, I was thinking about Psalm 130.
Oh, yeah, I was just saying, so I thought you was giving a date. During around the time 586 BC.
Okay.
Right? When this happened, what we're reading about with Zedekiah and the Babylonians, and what we're reading about now with the Edomites coming and burning the temple. So what Yahweh Kanan just quoted out, which is a link that goes with this, was the Psalms 137, 7 and 8, where in the Psalm, the prayer is made to the Most High to not forget the daughter of Babylon, which is the Edomites. When they said raise it, R-A-S-E, which means to destroy, to tear down, right? What they did to us in Jerusalem. Don't forget what they did. Sure, the Babylonians came and did what they did, but here these guys came. The Babylonians got their doggone payback because the Assyrian, the Persian and Medes came and got them. But them Edomites ain't get theirs. Don't forget them, Most High. And the prophecy as time goes on, the Most High says that he's going to get them back by our hand. We're going to be his battle axe in that day along with the angels. Come on. 137 verses 7 to 8.
Oh, okay.
Come on.
We gotta get Esau back.
Yeah.
That's not a 4
Yeah.
Right. I mean, while Esau is our biological brother, he's not spiritually our brother.
No.
Because he doesn't belong to the house of the Most High.
No.
Okay, yeah. I understand.
No. Because it's down pertaining to nations.
Right.
Right? It's now pertaining to nations. So you had, when you look at Ham, Shem, and Japheth, right? They were brothers. But now when you look at the nations that came out of them, they're not looked at as brothers. They're looked at as individual nations that came out of these men. Okay. So now when you come to Jacob and Esau, these were nations also that came out of the lineage of great men, right? And the Most High lets you know and distinguishes that these are just not men. These are now nations that are going to be within the earth. And then even within Israel, the Lord said there's going to be a company of nations. The sons that came out of his loins are a company of nations. They're like nations within themselves, but they still all form as one. Yahweh Kanan.
Oh, yeah. Lamentations 4:21. Lamentations 4, chapter 4, verse 21. Rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom, that dwelleth in the land of Uz. The cup also shall pass through unto thee. Thou shalt be drunken and shalt make thyself naked. Verse 22. The punishment of thine iniquity is accomplished, O daughter of Zion. He will no more carry thee away into captivity. He will visit thine iniquity, O daughter of Edom. He will discover thy sins.
Okay.
We see the company of nations. Yes, I mean, looking for that, company of nations. Company, I didn't get the word company.
Would you say you couldn't get the word company?
I know nation.
I'll give you a hint. It's in Genesis. All right.
I'm using this dictionary for this Bible. I've been saying it wrong too. It's not Chaldee, it's actually Chaldee. The CH is like character. It's pronounced Chaldee.
Chaldee. So you're looking at what is how does it curious to see how it's read in Hebrew. Okay.
Once again, I know it's kind of off. It says company of nations.
Shall come of thee?
Yeah, so I mean, you talking about Israel only or other people? Genesis 35 and 11.
Yeah, I've looked at that as Israel only.
You want to get that nation Because we're a nation within that. We're nations within a nation, right?
Yeah, because the reason why I say Israel, because when you read it in Genesis 35, 11 and 12, and Yahweh said unto him, I am power almighty, be fruitful and multiply, and a nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, right? A nation and a company of nations.
Right.
So the nation is Israel, but within Israel is like a company of nations. Each tribe is like their own nation. Levi is like their own nation. Ephraim is their own nation. Simeon is their own nation. And you can go on and on. Asher is their own nation. Issachar is their own nation, right? Exactly. It's viewed as such, but they all come from one, right? So it says, a nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins, right? Now, this is speaking to the same point, verse 12. And the land which I gave Abraham and Isaac, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land. Who is he speaking about? Israel. Right? Okay.
Kind of like what I was bringing out last night when we talk about the nation is universally wherever we got it throughout the four corners of the earth. And then, for example, you might have Discord here. That's a local. You know, it's like a small local group of that nation, which has many people from different nations that can come in. But together they make up the whole, you know, nation.
Make the whole surrounding.
Yeah. Collective.
Collective.
All right. So,
I was gonna say a perfect example too would be like the tribe of Gad, even from like a carnal history perspective. Look at the tribe of Gad alone. This is like so many nations in the tribe of Gad.
Come on from Gad.
Lingit to the Arapaho to the Oneida to the Lingit. You got on the list. Northeast, Midwest, West Coast, all types of nations of Gad.
Canada.
Kind of up in Canada too. And it's just one tribe.
One tribe. Oh, it's like I was watching the movies, the Taj Bull and the Cossacks. Taj Bull, the whole thing was the Cossacks. So they had all different links come out of different areas. Yeah, where the whole thing where they were all Cossacks, but they all had different groups that going into the Cossacks.
Cossacks are Russian?
Russian. They're all Russian.
All right. So back in First Esdras 1, and we have verse 55 again. It says, as for the house of the Lord, they burnt it and break down the walls of Jerusalem and set fire upon her towers. Verse 56. And as for her glorious things, they never ceased till they had consumed and brought them all to naught. And the people that were not slain with the sword, he carried unto Babylon. Right? So everything was destroyed, and those who weren't killed were slaves in Babylon. Verse 57, who became servants to him and his children, to the Persians' reign, to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah or Jeremy, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. The whole time of her desolation shall she rest until the full term of 70 years, which you read in Jeremiah, the 25th chapter, Jeremiah 25 and 11, which pretty much says the same thing as far as for the prophecy. It says in Jeremiah 25 and 11, it says, and this whole land shall be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. 70 years we was in captivity under them, until the Persians and the Medes came and then conquered Babylon, right? And then we were under the Persians and the Medes, but at that time we served them, but we were allowed to go back to Jerusalem under them, and then to repair and rebuild. That's what you read about when you read Ezra, Nehemiah, right? Those books in the Old Testament, give you the story and the history about that. Some of it is going to be even when we read further along in Esdras, in the upcoming chapters, but you read more in detail about that in Ezra and Nehemiah in the Old Testament. All right.
Hananiah, so-called prophet Hananiah, spoke to the people in peace, but never come to pass.
Peace, peace. When there is no peace. What's that? Jeremiah 8, I think. Yes, they have healed the daughter of my people slightly. Yeah. Yeah, Jeremiah 8 and 11. But they have healed the hurt of the daughter of my people slightly, saying peace, peace, when there is no peace. Right? All right, so that concludes today's Sabbath service lesson in 2nd Maccabees 15 and 1st Esdras chapter 1. Next week, I believe we are in Leviticus. In Leviticus?
Yeah, so it's when you do that one, you do 22. I think we're this time.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna confirm it right now. So the last, yeah, you did 20 and 21. So the next one is 22, 23. Okay. Again, so those who didn't hear, next week we'll be doing 22 and 23 in Leviticus.
Yes.
And then keep in mind also for those who are tracking the High Holy Day, I know we were talking about it before the or during the break for the Sabbath service, break in between Sabbath services, as far as for the Pentecost, right? So the Pentecost, or the Feast of the First Fruits Holy Day, the Feast of Weeks, will be celebrated on July 7th. July 7th, right? This is when we will be keeping the Feast of the First Fruits based on the counting of the weeks from the time of the wheat harvest up until the 50th day. Now, with that being said, if you are in tune with different camps, always recognize that certain camps keep the Feast of the First Fruits on different times. Why? Because it is based on the harvest. This is the only High Holy Day that you read about in the scriptures that's not based on a specific day and month, right? Whereas all the other High Holy Days will tell you this month on this day or these days. It's not the same with the first fruits, because it is pertaining to the harvest coming up, and when the harvest is presented, or the portion of that first fruit of the harvest presented to the priest, and then you start counting from 7 Sabbaths from that point, right? 7 Sabbaths after that, and then the morrow after the 7th day, the 7th Sabbath, pardon me, is when we keep the feast. So we will be keeping the feast on July 7th, which is a Saturday night, right? The Feast of the First Fruits. The first day, when you first start counting, is not a High Holy Day or a solemn assembly or a holy congregation. When you read it in Leviticus, it tells you that the 50th day is the holy congregation, when we all come together to worship and celebrate the first fruits, right? And sometimes it's a contention when, you know, it's been that way for years. Every now and again, it'll come up as to, isn't the first day a holy convocation? Well, it doesn't say that in the scriptures. It just tells you that that's what the priest made their offerings, right? And they did the offering to the Most High, but all Israel did not come together and treat it as a Sabbath and worship on the first day, just the 50th. All right. So just to throw that as a reminder. So if you have the High Holy calendar, make sure you mark that the next major High Holy Day is coming up outside of the course of Sabbath and the new moons will be the first fruits on July 7th at sundown. All right. And keep
that's where I was getting confused at. Okay, the priest had made their sacrifices, right?
Right. So the priest, when the people came and brought their offering to the priest of their first fruit, brought an omer of their offering to the priest, they waved it before the Most High to be accepted, right? And then they did the ceremonious offering and sacrifice on that day. But it tells you, well, it doesn't tell you that it was a holy congregation or a holy gathering on that first day. It tells you that now you're not supposed to eat anything of it until that 50th day, right? When we come together and we have the feast day, right? So that's why I said go back and read specifically Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, and read it in its entirety pertaining to just the first fruits, and you'll understand the ordinance on how and why we keep it the way it is.
Yeah, okay. All right, the water.
All right, so with that, we're going to say Ashar Shabbat, the water to those who dialed in, listened in, watched online for the service. Stay tuned. We're going to do the closing prayers, and everybody have a remaining blessed Sabbath and a prosperous upcoming week. Most High's will, we'll hear or see each other during the upcoming classes during next week. All right, with that again, Shalom Yasharallah and Ashar Shabbat.
Shalom.
Shalom.
You're not going out today, right?
Shalom. Looking at the weather.
You got a yellow ice.
I'm not sure. I know it's supposed to start coming down in about another half hour or so. So we'll see. We'll let you know. We'll play by it. We'll see.
All right.
All right. Shalom.
Shalom.
Somebody get the blinds. Robert Kusha. I gotta get another vest. I mean, a jean jacket. Your brother's jean jacket's like could fit right there. Yeah, mine is like way down here. I gotta get another one. Barakatha Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathalanawa, Parya Hagapin, Thawada Amun, La Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Ath, Yasha'Allah. I might upon you, Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Baba Kushai, Shamai, Lanawa, Aitha, Yum Yun, Aitha, Shalak, Mayaka Allah, Waha Alahayim, Tazwadakim, La, Shemaiah, Barak, Rapah, Magun, Waha Kazayak, Banya, Dasha Allah, Bashalat, Lanawa, Rabium, Kakama, Rabium, Da'ai, Rabium, Bayana, Rabium, Sabalanwa, Rabium, Amawan, Rabiim, Aqua, Rabiim, Ahabiim, Rabiim, Haganah, Rochanaya, Wasalak, Kol, Kata Ayamnawa, Lahaakim, Wa'akwa, Wayasha'ala, Yad, Wa'iwalam, Bahasham, Yahawashai, so Wada, Aman. English translation. Yahweh, in the name of Yahawashai, please listen to us now, right now. Send Michael and the righteous powers or angels to watch over, bless, heal, protect, and make strong the children of Israel. And send to us much wisdom, much knowledge, much understanding, much patience, much faith, much brotherhood, much love, much spiritual protection. And forgive all our sins for the brothers and sisters in Israel, always and forever. In the name of Yahawashai. Thank you. So be it. Four Corners Prayer. Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahawashai, Barak Nawa, Wayasha'ala, Wabat Yasaparim, Shema, Yasharallah, Yahweh, Allah Hayanawa, Yahweh, Echad. All right, English translation. Yahweh, in the name of Yahawashai, bless us in Israel and the house of books of schools. And as always, Deuteronomy 6:4, hear, O Israel, the Lord our power is one power. All right, again, Shah Shabbat, happy Sabbath, and everybody have a Tawab week. Shalom.
Shalom.
Akim, circle up.